The restaurant opened every day at the same time, and she arrived before most of the staff. She liked the quiet before customers came in. The chairs were still upside down on the tables, the lights were soft, and the air smelled of fresh bread and cleaning soap. In those moments, the place felt calm and honest. No pretending, no rush. Just work waiting to be done. She tied her apron slowly, smoothing the fabric with care. Serving tables was not something she dreamed about, but it paid the bills. It kept the lights on at home. That was enough, she told herself. Dreaming was a luxury she could not afford anymore. In the corner of the restaurant stood an old piano. It was dark brown, scratched, and slightly out of tune. Most people thought it was just decoration. Some guests asked about it, and the staff always gave the same answer. It's been here for years. No one really plays it. She tried not to look at it, but her eyes always went there. Even when she was carrying plates or wiping tables, she felt its presence. It was like someone standing behind her, silent but heavy. She never touched it. Not once other servers joked about the piano. One said it made the place look fancy. Another said it was useless and took up space. She laughed with them, but inside her chest felt tight. They did not know what that piano meant. They did not know what it took from her, or what it still held. That morning, the manager walked in earlier than usual. He checked his phone, sighed, and looked around the room. When he saw her, he smiled and waved. "Tonight might be slow," he said. "I was thinking maybe some soft music could help the mood." She knew what he was going to say before he said it. "Can you play the piano?" He asked casually, like he was asking her to refill water glasses. Her hands froze. She did not answer right away. The sound of that question filled her ears louder than the kitchen noise. She felt heat rise to her face. She shook her head quickly. "No," she said. "I don't play." The manager looked surprised. "Really? I thought I heard you humming once." It sounded trained. She forced a small smile. "Anyone can hum," he shrugged. "All right. Just thought I'd ask." He walked away, but the question stayed behind. It followed her as she set tables, as she polished glasses, as she checked reservations. Her heart beat faster than usual. She did not know why such a simple question had shaken her so deeply. At lunchtime, the restaurant filled up. People talked, laughed, and clinked glasses. She moved from table to table, doing her job well. She always did. Guests liked her because she listened, because she did not rush them, because she remembered small details. But none of them knew what she carried inside. An older woman sitting near the piano stared at it for a long time. When she ordered, she asked, "Does anyone play that thing anymore?" "No," she replied softly. "Not anymore." The woman smiled sadly. "That's a shame. Music makes places feel alive." She nodded and walked away, her throat tight. In the afternoon, during a short break, she sat alone in the staff room. She scrolled through her phone but did not really see anything. Her mind was far away, drifting back to a small room from years ago. A place with cracked walls, a window that barely closed, and a piano that sounded much better than the one in the restaurant. Back then, music filled her days. She practiced until her fingers hurt. She believed effort would lead somewhere. She believed talent mattered. She believed people when they said she had something special. Life had other plans. Bills came. Problems piled up. People who promised support slowly disappeared. One choice led to another, and before she knew it, music became something she could not afford time-wise, money-wise, emotionally, so she stopped. Not all at once. Slowly, first fewer hours, then missed days. Then months passed without touching a piano. She told herself it was temporary. Then she stopped telling herself anything at all. The break ended. She stood up, adjusted her apron, and went back to work. In the evening, the restaurant grew quieter. A few couples sat near the windows. Soft lights reflected off the tables. The piano sat untouched, as always. One of her coworkers leaned toward her and whispered, "Why don't you play? It would be cool." She shook her head. "Not my thing." The coworker laughed. Strange to have a piano and no one brave enough to touch it. Brave. That word stayed with her. As closing time came closer, she wiped down the last table. Her feet ached, her shoulders were sore, but her mind would not rest. She glanced at the piano one more time before turning off the lights. For a moment, she imagined sitting there. Just once. Just a few notes. No audience. No pressure. Then fear rushed in. Fear of remembering. Fear of wanting more. Fear of opening a door she had worked so hard to close. She grabbed her bag and left the restaurant without looking back. Outside, the night air was cool. She walked home slowly, listening to distant city sounds. Somewhere, someone was playing music. The notes floated through the air and faded. She stopped walking, for the first time in years. She asked herself a question she had avoided. What if she was tired of refusing? She took a deep breath and kept walking, not knowing that the piano she feared would soon change everything. Days passed after that evening. She kept herself busy at the restaurant. She moved between tables, refilled drinks, cleared plates, and greeted guests with a smile that looked effortless on the outside, but hid the turmoil inside. Each time she walked past the piano, a strange feeling settled in her chest. It was like the room held its breath, waiting for her to do something she was not ready to do. Her coworkers noticed subtle changes. She still performed her duties perfectly, but her steps were slower at times, as she often paused mid-motion as if she were thinking of something far away. Sometimes she hummed quietly while cleaning, soft melodies that only she seemed to hear. One of the waiters stopped for a moment and smiled. "You have a good voice," he said quietly, not wanting anyone else to hear. She smiled faintly, but did not respond. Talking about music brought back memories she wasn't ready to face. Memories of long hours spent practicing, of her fingers sliding over the keys, the joy she felt when she finally played a piece perfectly, and the disappointment when life forced her to leave it all behind. Music had once been her escape, her companion, and her pride. Now, it was a quiet ghost that followed her wherever she went. One afternoon, an older guest lingered near the piano. She noticed him watching it, tapping his fingers gently on the keys, as if imagining a melody. He seemed lost in thought, and she felt a pang of curiosity. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost reverent. "Do you ever play?" he asked. She shook her head, her eyes lowering to the floor. "Not anymore," she whispered. "That's too bad," he said with a sigh. Music makes people feel things they cannot say. It can tell stories words never reach. She nodded politely and walked away, but the man's words echoed in her mind. He had a point. Music did tell stories that no one else could understand, stories she had kept locked inside her for years. She realized she had avoided the piano not because she didn't love it, but because she was afraid. Afraid of failing, afraid of wanting something she couldn't have, afraid of opening a part of herself she had shut away. Later that week, she stayed after her shift to help the manager with closing. The restaurant was empty, chairs stacked on tables, lights dimmed, and the piano waited silently in the corner. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of her footsteps and the occasional creak of the floorboards. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to approach it. Her hands hovered above the keys. She didn't play. She just touched the edges of the piano, running her fingers lightly over the worn wood, feeling the warmth of its presence. She remembered her first lessons, how her teacher would correct her hand positions, how every mistake was an opportunity to grow, and how every success felt like flying. She remembered the recitals, the applause, and the look of pride on her parents' faces. Those moments were distant now, but they still lived in her, quiet but unbroken. A coworker walked in without knocking. "You're still here?" he asked, startled to see her near the piano. She jumped slightly and smiled awkwardly. "Yeah, just thinking," she said. He nodded and left without comment. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. For a moment, she felt alone, but not lonely. The piano had a presence that was comforting, like an old friend who understood everything she had been through. Over the next few days, small changes began to appear in her routine. She hummed louder, lingered longer near the piano, and sometimes even tapped a key lightly, just to feel the sound. The act was innocent, tentative, but it brought a thrill she hadn't felt in years. It reminded her of the life she had set aside, the dreams she had paused, and the talent she still possessed. One evening, a young couple came in, clearly celebrating something special. The man glanced at the piano and smiled. "I wish someone played tonight. It would make this place perfect," he said. She froze, her hands gripping the tray tighter. Her heart raced. She imagined herself sitting at the piano, letting the music flow, and for a moment the room transformed in her mind. The guests were not just eating. They were listening, experiencing, feeling something they could not explain. But fear pulled her back. She shook her head and focused on serving the table, hiding the longing that burned inside her. Later, she found herself alone again, the restaurant empty and quiet. She sat at the piano, hands trembling above the keys. She didn't play a full song. She didn't even play a melody she knew perfectly. She just pressed a few notes, listening to the sound echo in the empty room. It was enough to make her pulse quicken, enough to remind her that the music had never left her. That night, as she walked home, she felt a mixture of fear and excitement. She realized she had been avoiding the piano because it reminded her of what she had lost. But it also reminded her of what she still had inside. Talent, passion, the ability to move people, the ability to feel deeply, and maybe, just maybe, the courage to try again. In the following days, small moments kept reminding her of the piano's presence. A guest asked if she could play for a birthday party. Another mentioned how nice it would be to have soft music while they dined. She listened politely, but said no every time. Still, each question stirred something inside her. The fire she thought she had buried was flickering again. Gentle, but persistent. She began to watch others play music, listening to videos on her phone, reading about performances, and secretly imagining herself in those moments. She studied finger positions, rhythms, and notes, as if preparing for something she could not yet name. Each night, the piano waited, patient and silent, as if it knew she would come back when she was ready. One rainy afternoon, the restaurant was unusually quiet. Only a few guests remained, and the soft patter of rain against the windows created a calm, almost magical atmosphere. She moved through the tables slowly, wiping condensation from the glasses and smiling at the guests. The piano caught her eye, and she felt a familiar pull. She approached it again, hands hovering over the keys. Thinking about the past and the possibilities of the future, she pressed one key lightly. A single, soft note filled the air. It was imperfect, slightly off, but it was real. Her heart leapt. She pressed another note, then another, forming a small, hesitant melody. She paused, listening to the sound, feeling it vibrate through her fingers, her body, and her soul. She had almost forgotten how it felt to create music, to let it flow naturally. Without fear or expectation, as she played quietly, she imagined the faces of the guests smiling, the room filled with warmth, and herself finally embracing a part of who she was meant to be. The piano was no longer just an object in the corner. It was a bridge to her past, a door to her future, and a reminder that her talent and passion had never truly disappeared. It had only been waiting for her to return. That evening, she left the restaurant with a new sense of awareness. The piano was not a threat or a reminder of lost dreams. It was a companion, a challenge, and a friend. And slowly, day by day, she realized that the fear she had felt for so long was only the beginning of something greater. The moment she had been avoiding was approaching, and she knew that when the time came, she would not refuse it. The day came unexpectedly. The restaurant was packed, more than usual, with people chatting loudly, servers moving quickly between tables, and dishes clattering from the kitchen. It was one of those nights when everything seemed chaotic, and the manager's stress was clear on his face. He hurried from table to table, checking on guests, handling complaints, and trying to make sure everything ran smoothly. She was moving through the crowd, refilling glasses and clearing plates, trying to stay calm amidst the noise. Her mind, however, was elsewhere. Every time she passed the piano in the corner, her heart skipped a beat. She felt its silent presence watching her. Waiting for something she was not yet ready to give, suddenly a commotion erupted near the entrance. A group of late arrivals was complaining about their reservation. The manager rushed over, looking flustered. "We'll find you a table," he said, trying to keep a calm voice. But his hands were shaking. While he dealt with them, a server ran up to her. "The entertainment canceled. The pianist isn't coming. They asked if anyone here can play." Her stomach dropped. She froze in place. All eyes seemed to turn toward her, even though she wasn't sure anyone actually expected her to say yes. Fear surged through her, memories of past mistakes and lost opportunities pressing down like a weight. She could not lift. The manager's voice called her name. "Can you play? Just for tonight, please?" She shook her head quickly. I can't," she said, her voice trembling. Her hands shook as she wiped a table, avoiding eye contact with anyone. A few guests whispered among themselves, and one of the older waiters raised an eyebrow in surprise. They did not know her story, her talent, or the years she had spent away from music. All they saw was a server who had suddenly been asked to perform, but something inside her stirred. Fear was still there, but so was a flicker of excitement. She imagined herself at the piano, letting the notes flow, the room quieting as people listened. The thought was intoxicating, powerful, and terrifying all at once. She looked at the manager again. His eyes were filled with hope and desperation. Without thinking, without words, she found herself walking slowly toward the piano. Her steps felt heavy, each one carrying the weight of years she had left behind. She did not know if she could play, if she would fail, or if she would remember everything she had forgotten. The guests had begun to notice her approach. Some whispered to each other, wondering if she would actually play. The restaurant felt suddenly still, as if everyone could sense that something important was about to happen. She sat down on the bench, her hands hovering over the keys. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself breathe. She remembered lessons, recitals, and quiet evenings, practicing alone. She remembered the joy, the frustration, the hope, and the heartbreak. All of it rushed back in a flood of emotions she could barely contain. Her fingers touched the keys lightly, producing a sound that made her heart leap. She played slowly at first, cautious, testing her memory, testing herself. The notes were not perfect, but they were alive. They carried a piece of her soul she had kept hidden for so long. The room grew quiet. Conversations faded. Guests who were eating stopped mid-bite, listening. The clatter of dishes and glasses seemed distant, replaced by the music that began to fill the space. She could feel it, the energy of the room shifting, the attention of everyone present drawing her out of herself. She remembered how music could move people, how it could make them feel things they could not express in words. She let herself feel it too, letting the notes flow freely, letting the memories and emotions guide her fingers. The piano was no longer an object in the corner. It was an extension of herself, a voice she had forgotten she still had. Time seemed to blur. She played with growing confidence, weaving together melodies she had learned years ago with emotions she had kept locked away. Each note was a declaration, a statement that she still existed, that her passion had not died, that she could rise above fear and doubt. The guests were captivated. Some had tears in their eyes. Others leaned forward, mesmerized by the unexpected beauty that filled the room. The manager watched in awe, unable to hide his surprise and admiration. She had taken a quiet, ordinary night and transformed it into something extraordinary as she played. She felt a sense of release, a lightness she had not known in years. The piano no longer represented fear or failure. It was a bridge to her true self. She realized that refusing it had kept her safe, but it had also kept her from experiencing joy. Now, in this moment, she understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. The final notes lingered in the air, soft and powerful. The room remained still for a heartbeat, and then applause erupted. Guests stood, clapping and cheering, some whistling, others shouting words of admiration. She sat frozen for a moment, unsure if she deserved it, but slowly. Smiles spread across her face. The manager came up to her, eyes shining. "That was incredible. Absolutely incredible. I didn't know you could do that. She shook her head, laughing softly, tears in her eyes. I forgot I could. One of the guests approached her and said, "You have to play again. You have to share this talent more often." She nodded, a mixture of humility and disbelief washing over her. It was true. She had been hiding, running from her past, but now she understood that her talent was not something to bury. It was something to embrace, something to share. That night, as she left the restaurant, the applause and cheers still ringing in her ears, she felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. She had faced fear and stepped forward. She had reminded herself of who she was, and for the first time in a long time, she felt whole again. The piano had waited patiently, and she had finally returned to it. Not as a fear, not as a memory, but as a bridge to her true self, a tool to express everything she had kept inside. She knew that this was only the beginning. Many nights would follow, each one offering new challenges, new opportunities, and new joys. But tonight was hers, and she had claimed it with courage and music. The evening began quietly enough, with only a few guests sitting near the windows, enjoying soft conversations and the warm glow of the lights. She had spent the day like any other, serving tables, refilling drinks, and keeping everything running smoothly. But inside, a quiet tension hummed beneath her calm exterior. She knew the piano awaited her, and she had made a silent promise to herself that tonight she would not walk away from it. The manager approached her, a hopeful smile on his face. "The pianist canceled again," he said softly. Would you consider playing tonight? Just a little? The guests would really enjoy it." She swallowed hard, her hands gripping the tray tightly. Her mind raced with fear, doubt, and the memories of years gone by. She shook her head initially, unsure if she had the courage. But something in his eyes, the trust and hope, gave her strength. She nodded slowly. The guests began to notice. Whispers floated around the room, curiosity sparkling in their eyes. A few leaned closer, as if sensing something extraordinary about to happen. She walked toward the piano, her steps measured and deliberate, each one carrying the weight of years of hidden talent and lost opportunity. Sitting down on the bench, she took a deep breath and let her fingers hover above the keys. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the texture of the worn wood beneath her fingertips. The restaurant seemed quiet in anticipation, as though the walls themselves were waiting to hear the music that would soon fill the air. She began softly, testing the notes, reconnecting with her hands and memory. A single melody grew slowly, delicate yet confident. Each note was precise, yet carried emotion, telling a story she had never shared out loud. The guests stopped their conversations, their attention drawn to the room's corner where she played. The soft sound of the piano began to weave through the space, blending with the warmth of the lights, creating an atmosphere of awe and wonder as she played. She remembered the hours of practice, the lessons, the recitals, and the long nights alone with music. She remembered the joy of perfecting a piece, the frustration of mistakes, and the deep, unshakable love for the sound of the piano. All of those emotions surfaced now, transforming her performance from a simple melody to something powerful and real. Her confidence grew with each passing note. She allowed herself to feel, to let the music carry her, to let the room fill with the emotion she had kept hidden for so long. The guests were mesmerized. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, captivated by the unexpected depth and beauty. The energy in the room shifted, every listener holding their breath, caught in the spell of her playing. For the first time in years, she felt completely free. The piano was no longer a symbol of fear or regret. It was a voice, a channel for everything she had kept inside. She let the melody grow richer, more intricate, and more expressive. She played with her whole heart, her fingers dancing across the keys, telling a story that words could never capture. The applause did not come immediately. The restaurant was silent except for the music. Every guest was held in the moment, transported by her talent and the emotions she conveyed. Even the kitchen staff paused, listening from the doorway, amazed at the transformation taking place before them. When she reached the final notes, she allowed them to linger, soft and resonant. The silence that followed was powerful, filled with awe and respect. Then, slowly, the room erupted in applause. Guests clapped enthusiastically, some standing, some cheering, and some wiping tears from their eyes. The energy of the audience was electric, a combination of surprise, admiration, and gratitude. The manager rushed over, his face alight with amazement. "That was incredible. I didn't know you had it in you. Everyone is talking about it." She laughed softly, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. I forgot I could do this," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. She had rediscovered a part of herself that had lain dormant for years. The music had reminded her of who she truly was, and in that moment, she felt a sense of completeness she hadn't felt in a long time. Guests approached her, expressing their delight and admiration. One man said, "You have to play more often." "This was magical," another woman whispered. "I didn't expect this at all. You're amazing." She nodded and smiled, overwhelmed but grateful. The music had not only transformed the evening for the guests, but it also transformed her from within. As she stepped away from the piano, she felt a rush of exhilaration. The fear that had held her back for so long had dissipated, replaced by confidence and joy. She realized that refusing the piano had once been a way to protect herself, but embracing it now gave her power and freedom. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Guests lingered, asking if she would play again. Some left generous tips and kind notes, expressing their gratitude for the unexpected performance. Her coworkers watched her with newfound respect, seeing her not just as a server but as someone with immense talent and courage. Walking home that night, she felt a lightness she hadn't known in years. The city lights reflected in the wet streets, and the distant hum of life seemed to echo the music she had played. She thought about the piano waiting for her back at the restaurant, patient and unjudging, and she knew she would return. Not out of obligation, not out of fear, but because she wanted to. Because it was hers. And it always had been. That night marked a turning point. She had faced her fear, embraced her talent, and discovered that music could heal and transform not only the listeners, but also herself. She had stepped into a part of her life she had once abandoned. The experience left her feeling alive in a way she had not felt for years. The piano had been waiting for her. She had finally answered its call. Every note she had played carried with it the struggles, the losses, and the hopes of her past. And as she walked under the quiet night sky, she knew that this was only the beginning. There would be challenges, there would be doubts, but now she had proven to herself that she could rise above them. She had found her voice again, and it was strong, clear, and unshakable. Music was no longer a memory or a dream. It was a part of her life, a source of joy, courage, and endless possibilities. The morning after her first performance, she arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual. The air was fresh, and the streets outside were quiet, carrying a sense of promise. Her steps felt lighter as she approached the door, her heart not burdened by fear or doubt, but filled with anticipation. The piano awaited her, as it always had, patient and silent, ready to share the next chapter of her life. The manager greeted her with an excited smile. "You were amazing last night. Guests are still talking about your performance. I think you might have found something special here." She nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. The acknowledgement was gratifying, but more than that, it was a reminder that her choice to play, to face her fear, had changed everything. She remembered the years she had spent avoiding the piano, hiding from her talent, and now she understood how much energy and joy she had lost by doing so throughout the day. Guests arrived, some specifically asking for her. They wanted to hear the music that had left such a lasting impression. She moved through the restaurant, serving tables as she always did. But now, there was a spark in her steps, a sense of pride and confidence that others noticed immediately. Her coworkers watched her with admiration, realizing that she had tapped into something extraordinary later that afternoon. The restaurant was quiet, the sun casting long shadows across the tables. She approached the piano again, her fingers tracing the worn wood gently. She sat down, taking a deep breath, and allowed herself to play freely. She no longer hesitated, no longer feared making mistakes. Each note was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, her triumphs, and her rediscovered passion. The music flowed effortlessly, weaving a story that captured the attention of anyone who walked in. Even staff who had never noticed her presence stopped to listen, mesmerized by the depth and emotion she conveyed. The room seemed to transform with every chord, filled with warmth, energy, and life, as she played. She thought about the path that had led her here. She remembered the long hours spent at tables, the moments of self-doubt, the fear of failure, and the courage it took to face the piano again. Every challenge she had endured now felt like preparation for this moment. Her music was no longer just sound. It was a testament to her resilience, her strength, and her willingness to embrace her true self. Days turned into weeks, and her role at the restaurant began to shift. Guests came not only for the food, but for the music she brought into the space. The restaurant owner noticed an increase in visitors, some coming specifically to hear her play. It was no longer just a place to work. It had become a place where she could share her talent, touch lives, and find fulfillment in ways she had once thought impossible. Opportunities started to appear gradually. Invitations to perform at small local events, collaborations with other musicians, and offers to teach beginners emerged. Each opportunity was a chance to grow, to explore her abilities, and to build a future that she had long dreamed of. She embraced them carefully, mindful of her responsibilities, but eager to see how far she could go. One evening, after finishing her shift, she sat alone by the piano. Reflecting on the journey she had taken, she thought about the years she had spent avoiding music, the fear and doubt that had held her back, and the moment she finally allowed herself to play in front of others. It had been a turning point, a moment of courage that reshaped her life. Her thoughts wandered to the guests who had been touched by her music, to the staff who had watched in awe, and to the manager who had believed in her potential, even when she doubted herself. She realized that her talent had the power not only to transform her life, but to affect those around her. Each note she played carried connection, emotion, and understanding. In the following months, she continued to play regularly at the restaurant, each performance growing stronger, more confident, and more expressive. She developed her own style, blending her past experiences with new influences, creating music that was uniquely hers. The piano became a partner, a tool for self-expression, and a source of joy that permeated every aspect of her life. Her life outside the restaurant began to change as well. She felt more confident, more willing to take risks, and more open to experiences she had previously avoided. Friends and family noticed a new lightness in her demeanor, a sense of fulfillment that came from embracing her passion and sharing it with the world. The act of facing her fear and choosing to play had ripple effects, touching every corner of her life. She often reflected on the journey, remembering the nights she spent avoiding the piano, the times she doubted herself, and the fear that had once seemed insurmountable. Those memories no longer held power over her. Instead, they served as reminders of her growth, resilience, and determination. She had transformed her fear into courage, her hesitation into action, and her hidden talent into a gift shared with others. The restaurant became a hub for music, community, and connection. Guests returned not only for the food, but for the experience, for the warmth and emotion that her performances brought to the space. Her presence changed the atmosphere, making it more vibrant, welcoming, and alive. She had created a space where people could feel, connect, and be inspired, all through the power of music. Looking back, she realized that refusing the piano had been a necessary part of her journey. It had allowed her to understand the value of courage, patience, and self-belief. It had prepared her to appreciate the joy of returning to something she loved, to embrace her talent fully, and to recognize the impact she could have on others. One evening, after the restaurant had closed and the last guests had left, she sat at the piano, letting her fingers dance across the keys. She played with freedom, passion, and joy, knowing that this was where she belonged. The music filled the room, echoing through the walls, a testament to her journey, her resilience, and the beauty of embracing one's true self. She smiled softly, closing her eyes as the final notes lingered in the air. The piano, patient and steadfast, had guided her through fear, doubt, and hesitation. And now it was a source of strength, creativity, and happiness. She had found her voice, reclaimed her talent, and discovered a world of possibilities that awaited her. The journey had not been easy, but it had led her to a place of fulfillment, courage, and inspiration. Her story was not just about playing the piano. It was about resilience, courage, and the power of facing fear. It was about embracing one's passion, even when life seemed to demand otherwise. And as she played, the music told that story clearly, connecting hearts, inspiring minds, and reminding everyone that sometimes the greatest moments come from the courage to take that first step. She had refused once, but now she had embraced. And the world was brighter because of it. Months had passed since her first performance at the restaurant, and life had begun to settle into a rhythm she had once thought impossible. The piano had become a part of her daily routine, not as a burden, not as a symbol of fear, but as a companion and a source of joy. Every note she played carried confidence, emotion, a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. Guests now came not only for the food but for the music she created. Some would arrive early, hoping to catch a few minutes of her playing before dinner, while others lingered after their meals just to hear the melodies that filled the room. She had discovered that her music had the power to calm anxious minds, lift heavy hearts, and create a shared sense of happiness among strangers. Each day she played not just for herself but for everyone around her. Her confidence continued to grow, and with it came new opportunities. A local community center invited her to teach a small group of children who wanted to learn piano. She had hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to guide others. But she realized that teaching was another way to share the joy she had reclaimed. She prepared lessons carefully, thinking about the small successes and struggles she had experienced herself, and found that helping others discover their talent brought her just as much fulfillment as playing for guests. The first lesson was both nerve-wracking and exciting. A small group of children sat in front of the piano, eyes wide with curiosity and anticipation. She smiled at them, trying to hide the flutter in her chest, and began to show them the basics. As they tried to imitate her movements, stumble over notes, and then succeed, she felt a warmth spread through her. This was more than teaching. It was connecting, inspiring, and passing on a love she had once thought lost. Word spread quickly about her lessons, and more children joined, eager to learn from someone whose music had already touched so many hearts. She balanced her restaurant work, her lessons, and her personal practice carefully, learning to manage her time and energy in ways that allowed her passion to grow without becoming overwhelming. Each day she felt more capable, more alive, and more in tune with herself than ever before. Meanwhile, the restaurant continued to thrive. Guests often asked about her background, and she found herself sharing snippets of her story, not for attention, but as a way to inspire others. They were fascinated by her journey, from avoiding the piano to embracing it, and many left feeling encouraged to pursue their own dreams, whether big or small. She realized that her experiences could reach far beyond the restaurant walls, touching lives she could never have imagined. With growing confidence, she began experimenting with her music, creating original compositions inspired by her life, her challenges, and her triumphs. She recorded small pieces on her phone, sharing them with friends and students. The response was overwhelmingly positive, and she discovered that music could be both personal and universal, a bridge between her inner world and the outside world. One evening, a local music event approached her, offering a chance to perform in front of a larger audience. The idea filled her with excitement and nervousness. She knew it was another step, another challenge, but it also represented growth, courage, and the opportunity to reach new people. She spent days preparing, rehearsing each piece, and imagining how her music might touch listeners in a different setting. The night of the event arrived. The venue was filled with strangers, curious, and expectant. She felt a familiar flutter in her stomach, a mix of excitement and fear. But as she sat at the piano, she drew a deep breath, remembering all the moments that had brought her here, the refusals, the doubts, the quiet practice sessions, the first performance in the restaurant. Every step had prepared her for this moment. Her fingers touched the keys, and the first notes filled the room. Just like before, the music commanded attention. This time, however, it carried the weight of experience, the depth of months spent rediscovering herself, and the joy of sharing that discovery. The audience listened in silence, caught in the beauty and emotion of her playing. By the final note, applause erupted, louder and more enthusiastic than she had ever experienced. She felt a rush of pride, humility, and exhilaration all at once. The performance was not just about music. It was about growth, courage, and the journey from fear to confidence. She realized that embracing her talent had opened doors she had never expected, transforming not only her own life, but the lives of those she touched. Afterward, she returned to her routine, but things had shifted subtly. She had learned that her courage and passion were not limited to one moment or one place. Music could accompany her through every challenge, every opportunity, and every new chapter. She understood that growth was a journey, not a destination, and that every note she played, every lesson she gave, every audience she inspired was part of a larger story she was still writing. Her days became a delicate balance of work, practice, teaching, and exploration. She discovered new ways to express herself, to inspire, and to connect with people through music. The piano, once a symbol of fear and hesitation, had become a tool of empowerment, creativity, and joy. She found herself smiling more, laughing more, and sharing her light with the world in ways she had never imagined. She often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the early days of refusal and fear to the first hesitant notes and the applause that followed, every moment had shaped her. She realized that her story was not just about talent or music. It was about resilience, courage, and the willingness to embrace life fully. It was about taking risks, facing fears, and finding joy in unexpected places. In quiet moments, she would sit at the piano and play for herself. Not for an audience, not for recognition, but simply for the love of the music. These moments were sacred, allowing her to reconnect with her passion, process her emotions, and celebrate her growth. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, but she was ready. She had discovered her strength, her voice, and the power of choosing courage over fear. Through all of this, she remained humble, grounded, and grateful. She remembered the manager who believed in her, the guests who had listened with open hearts, and the children who now learned from her. Each interaction reminded her that talent and passion were gifts meant to be shared, and that true fulfillment came from giving as much as receiving. Her journey was ongoing, a series of steps, moments, and choices that continued to shape her life. She had gone from refusing the piano to embracing it fully, from hiding her talent to sharing it with the world, and from fear to courage. And as she sat at the piano playing melodies that reflected her story, she knew that the best was still yet to come. Life, like music, was a continuous journey, full of surprises, challenges, and beauty. And she was ready to face it all with an open heart and a fearless spirit.